Thank you. School. Thank you everyone for doing that in the best fashion possible. It's absolutely shoulder to shoulder and we're at a premium for seats, so it was great to get you all in as quickly as we possibly could. We're about to commence today's formal and very important occasion in our school's calendar, our Foundation Day Assembly. And it's vital that we show the absolute respect and the attention that this occasion deserves. Today is a great day in our school's history and we need to observe that with our best possible manners and our best efforts in this room today, as I'm sure you will. In October 1863, 16 young men began their education and sat down for their first day at Ipswich Grammar School. 16 boys. That's about 2 rows of boys in the room. And today there's almost 1,050 of you in the room. Today we call it Foundation Day, and it's actually something more like our birthday. So it's a day of celebration. And we're 158 years on now, and Foundation Day is a special day where students, both past and present, can reflect on the history that they have been involved in creating and making. Today's assembly is a celebration of not only that first day, but every other day since then. So we'll start in our usual way. Please stand quietly for the processional.
Headmaster, teachers and staff, special guests and students. Indigenous students like me have attended IGS since the early years of the school's foundation. It has become a home to many Indigenous students and a place of opportunity. With that being said, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Yagara and Yugarabal peoples, and pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging.
Thank you, Drew. Please be seated. Welcome our Deputy Chair of the Board of Trustees, Mr Des Wybird and Mrs Sharon Wybird, Old Boy Senator Paul Scarr, our special guest, Old Boy Professor Adam Scott, President of the Old Boys Association, Andrew Kinman, Old Boy Committee members and Old Boys. It's always wonderful to host guests and Old Boys here at IGS. Thank you for being here today to continue your association with our great school and contribute to its history and tradition once more. I'd like to invite our headmaster, Mr Morrison, to give his address this morning. Thank you, sir.
Thanks very much, Mr Christie. Good morning, special guests. Good morning, Old Boys. Good morning, colleagues. And of course, good morning, boys. It's really wonderful to be here. Can I give a special welcome, though, to the 15 new boys who have joined Ipswich Grammar School for Term 4 this year. I know 5 of those boys at least are boarders, brand new boarders to our boarding house, some of whom have had to quarantine for 2 weeks prior to being able to start at Ipswich Grammar School. So to me that demonstrates a real commitment to our school and a real effort in terms of getting here to enrol in our boarding house. So a special welcome to all of those new boys. I know you'll love your experience at Ipswich Grammar School. Can I also welcome Connor Mills, who is the last enrolment that occurred in the last few days, and Connor is number 17,922. And I must say to you boys and staff and guests that it's a fantastic feeling standing up here looking at an absolutely packed auditorium. Wonderful for two reasons. One, because of the significant symbolic representation of our growing enrolment that I see in front of us. It's just quite amazing. In days gone by, we didn't look as full as this, I can tell you that. So that's a really great thing to look at, a good sign of momentum for our school and a community that's confident in Ipswich Grammar School. But also, secondly, it's just wonderful to have an assembly and a gathering of all our boys, all the way from prep to year 12, because we've had actually very few assemblies this year, which has actually been a shame. A lot of the formal learning in our school occurs in the classrooms, of course, but some of the less formal learning actually occurs on ceremonies and assemblies. And it's important to be on assemblies when we gather as a group of boys, one community of staff and boys, and we start to understand who we are, what our history is, and what our future is. And understanding that enrolment increase is wonderful for our school. It's also important to remember, though, that there are a number of boys at every event who are actually brand new or close to brand new at our school. So, boys, I'd just like you to do this for me, please, if you could cooperate. Could I have all the boys who started at Ipswich Grammar School after October 7 last year, October 7, 2020, could you just raise your hands now for me? I don't care if you're in Year 12, Year 11, Year 10, all the preps should have their hand up. I don't think you're listening to me, boys. Any boy, prep, you should have your hands up. Any boy who started brand new to this school after October the 7th last year. No white shirts. That might be right. Right, if you were standing here, and some of the special guests might like to turn around. Boys, just keep your hands in the air. Just do this for me for 1 minute. It won't kill you. Thank you. Rightio, thanks lads. Hands down. Now that is a massive number of boys that actually have never experienced a Foundation Day Assembly and have actually experienced probably very few assemblies compared to some of the lads who've been here for, in the case of Sheldon Moore in his 13th year, who've seen assemblies day in, week out, month out. They know what goes on in assemblies. So today's an important day, lads, boys that have been here for a while and boys that have not been here for a while, to understand what makes Ipswich Grammar School tick, because this is part and parcel of why Ipswich Grammar School is the school it is. And as Mr. Christie said, today we recognise the first day of classes at Ipswich Grammar School. 16 boys sitting in front of Mr. Stuart Hawthorne, the first headmaster. And those of you that have been in the Ladley Centre foyer would know that his portrait is the top one on the far left, huge, big, bushy beard. Mr. Hawthorne was the first headmaster, and he was the only teacher and he was the only headmaster. So he had quite a job ahead of him. And in those 16 boys, there were 9-year-olds and there were 17-year-olds. So I know the staff amongst us here today would be thinking, my goodness, that's a bit of a challenge, isn't it, educationally? To deliver something meaningful to boys that are 9 years old, but also to deliver something meaningful to 17-year-old boys is no small challenge. But if I know Ipswich Grammar like I do, and I'm sure it was pretty much the same in a lot of ways back in 1863, I'll bet the 17-year-old boys were helping out and supporting Mr. Hawthorne by probably teaching the little guys. That's the way we roll in this place. Huge day for our school, of course. Today I also want to acknowledge the old boys and their part in the history of Ipswich Grammar School. The first meeting of the Old Boys Association occurred on July the 25th, 1907. That's an awfully long time again, 1907. I've had the pleasure for my 6 years so far of being headmaster here of working with a fantastic Old Boys Council. And to be honest and frank with you, when I became headmaster of the school, the Old Boys Association was anything but vibrant and anything but active. It had actually had a little bit of a tough spell for perhaps a decade or so. So I really take my hats off and acknowledge the old boys, some of them current staff members who joined the Old Boys Council determined to make a difference for the Old Boys Association, for the school, and saw the potential in having a strong Old Boys Association and the impact that that could make for old boys and the impact that could make on current boys as well. And I'd just like at this point, if they could cooperate for me, the members of the Old Boy Council, if you could just stand very briefly for me, please. all of you that are in attendance today, and most of them are here today. These gentlemen, including the President, Mr. Kinman, and the Vice President, Mr. Kasos, and others in the group, some of whom I'll name in a tick, have been instrumental in invigorating an Old Boys Association which is now vibrant and attracting hundreds of boys that used to go to Ipswich Grammar School back to events where they can join up, link up and have wonderful conversations about the old days of their school. Thank you, gentlemen, for your fantastic support. A round of applause, I think. Thank you very much. The old boys of our school are very important to our school because they are our school. Just like you boys, prep all the way to year 12, you're all heading to be an old boy. It's inevitable, and we think that that's absolutely wonderful. The milestones of some of the old boys who just stood are the milestones of Ipswich Grammar School. So I might just pick out a few examples and explain what I'm talking about. Mr. Kinman, the president of the Old Boys Association, was boy number 7,613, and he's in the class of 1983. And in 1983, in August, the H.G. Wilson Science Building was open, and Mr. Kinman, you might probably remember that. Hopefully you maybe played a little part in that as a boy watching that happen. And the H.G. Wilson Science Building was named after an old boy and previous Deputy Chair of the Board, Harry Wilson, and was opened on August the 3rd, 1983, and Mr. Kinman was here when that happened. It cost $1.4 million, boys. Now you probably, and I know many of you have been in that building, you probably wonder at how that building can cost $1.4 million. And that might not sound like a lot of money these days, but that was actually the most expensive building in the history of Ipswich Grammar School at that stage in 1983 at $1.4 million. To give you a point of contrast, the STEM building, which was opened late last year and has been working this year, and I know many of you have been in that building, boys, that cost $10.5 million. So I guess that's something to do with perhaps inflation and the cost of things. Second old boy I'd like to mention is Mr. Rob Wadley, student number 4,868, and Mr. Rod Juice, student number 5,013, and they're both class of 1966. Also in the 60s was Mr. Paul Kasos, who's boy number 5,319. Good to see you got ahead of your good mate Greg Delbridge, Mr. Kasos, because he was boy number 5,330. Where are you, Greg? Back here, yes. So Paul beat you into the school. And they were both class of 1969. So all those four boys were here in the 60s. In the 60s, Ipswich Grammar School was the era of amazing developments, lads. Amazing developments. And I'm not joking here. Tape recorders were introduced to the school. You probably don't even know what a tape recorder is, lads. A television. The school had its first television. It might have been colour. I can't actually confirm it. No, the boys are saying it wasn't. All right. Boys, it wasn't a colour TV. It was a black and white TV. You will never understand what a black and white TV is, but it's pretty interesting. And the other thing, which I don't think we actually have any of these now, I hope we don't, Mr. Dyson, overhead projectors. Overhead projectors came into the school in the 1960s, and I even think in the 1960s, those fantastic photograph machines came into the school as well. Boys, I doubt any of you have ever come across a handout or a worksheet that's come off a photograph machine. But one of the essential ingredients in a photograph machine was methylated spirits. And the smell of methylated spirits on a worksheet hung around for about 15 seconds. And I know a lot of boys liked having a quick, curious smell of that methylated spirits when they get the worksheet. I'm glad we don't do that anymore, lads, at all. So those four gentlemen, old boys, were here in the 60s, and it was all about TV and tape recorders. Lucas Kent, who's not able to be here, was student number 13,375, and he's from the class of 2009. And he was here when the Early Childhood Education Centre was opened in October the 12th by a very, very dear old boy to us, recently departed last year, Sir Lou Edwards, the father of course, our current Chair of the Board, Mr. Dave Edwards, actually opened that building back in 2009. More recently, of course, we've got boys currently here as current boys sitting on assembly who in time will associate themselves also with buildings. So the class 157 and probably class 158 will probably associate the STEM building with some of their time at Ipswich Grammar School. And I hope, boys, in the future, Class 159, our Year 11s, waiting to be the white shirts, with great anticipation in 2022, will associate themselves with the Great Hall Enhancement Project, which is a massive landscape project which we hope to kick off now in March, completely surrounding the Great Hall, creating a totally new look to our school as you emerge up the driveway off Darling Street. So it's a very, very major project, and I hope Year 12s next year get to see that completed, because that will be truly magnificent. Now, I've talked about buildings, I've talked about milestones, but of course IGS isn't just about buildings. We don't just build buildings. We love building buildings. They're important and they're good and we need to do it. We build great men. That's actually what the school is about. And since 1863, 17,921 boys, past and living, have been through Ipswich Grammar School or are currently here as a boy from prep to Year 12. And the school just keeps getting better and better, generation after generation, project after project, and boy after boy. I want to read to you now, and you'll have to listen carefully, gentlemen, because this is not the easiest passage to listen to. It's brief, but it'll take 2 or 3 minutes for me to read it. I want to read you Governor Bowen's concluding remarks at the inauguration of Ipswich Grammar School back in 1863. Now, Bowen was the first governor of Queensland, and if you think of Bowen Hills, and I do believe there's an electric Senator Scar Bowen, and I'm sure they'll both be named after him. So these were his words at the inauguration of our school. Listen carefully, try and understand what you're listening to, because it's obviously a very different style of communication. I will have to read it. I probably won't be able to look at you because it's a little bit difficult to read. There is some responsibility as well as honour in being concerned with the opening of this institution, the first of the kind in Queensland, but destined, I hope, to be a model to many successors. I think I may promise alike for the government and for the trustees that no care shall be wanting on their part to secure a good beginning. I trust I may reckon on finding in the whole body of the masters, the staff, a conscientious zeal in the discharge of their duty. Still, with whatever skill and attention their studies may be chosen and directed, it must rest mainly with the scholars themselves, the boys, the students, whether the result shall be successful by every motive which can be influenced, reflecting and responsible beings, by regard for their own welfare and happiness in the world, by the fear of future discredit, by the hope of lasting fame, by motives yet more urgent, by nobler and purer aspirations, by the duty of obedience to the will of our Creator, by the awful account which shall have to render of the talents entrusted to us for improvement. By those high arguments I affectionately exhort all who now hear me, so to number their days that they may apply their hearts onto wisdom. Now, some of you may have latched on to what the governor was talking about, and some of you, frankly, probably thought, my goodness, what was all that about? Boys, translation required. What that was about the potential sitting in every boy, those first 16 boys, aged 9 to 17, the potential sitting in those boys, and the desire in everyone connected with Ipswich Grammar School that those boys would excel and do the very best that they can. And if you think of our vision statement, which you hear many, many times from me, exceptional performance, those 2 words are exactly what Governor Bowen was saying in those 300 words back in 1863. And long may it be the case that boys can come to this school and explore their capacity and their potential. We are all of us, boys, staff and guests, old boys, we are very, very fortunate to be associated with a great, great school. Thank you for joining us to celebrate Foundation Day 2021. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. 4 words: we make great men. And I think you're about to meet one. Professor Adam Scott is the old boy of 1992. and he is the Director of Cardiac Sciences at the Royal Brisbane Women's Hospital. Professor Scott is also one of the founding fathers of modern telehealth in Australia. In 2011, after seeing a need to improve access to mental health care in Australia, he found the inspiration to create the White Cloud Foundation. Recently partnering with the Queensland Rugby Union, the White Cloud Foundation provides its tele-mental health services to affiliated clubs, players and communities across the state. He is a Fellow of the Cardiac Society of Australia and New Zealand, the European Society of Cardiology, the American College of Cardiology and Exercise and Sports Science Australia, and is an adjunct professor at QT. It is wonderful to have Professor Scott back at IGS today to deliver his address and share some of his remarkable journey. Would you please welcome Professor Adam Scott.
Good morning. It is an honour and a privilege to return to Ipswich Grammar, to the hallowed grounds of Oval number 4 here. This is the third time I've been back. When 30 years ago I sat over here, and I still think of myself as the 17-year-old that was sitting there in the white shirt. And it still brings a smile to my face about the memories that from grade 8, when we first arrived, not the young preppies, to going through to grade 12, the values that were instilled in all of us, and the honour and privilege when leaving Ipswich Grammar to go on to be able to use them on a daily basis. COVID-19, I'm not going to talk about that. I've said it once, we're not going to talk about it. But what I do want to say is, this is the time for opportunity and growth. It's been a really tough year for the last 2 years, but it's demonstrated how important your school values are to you. Resilience, honour, belonging. You have all demonstrated those throughout those last 2 years in this particularly tough time, and you are going to experience it even more moving forward in your life. And I've always thought about if I ever got invited back to speak to this audience, what I would say. And I've thought long and hard about it, and I thought, I'm going to speak to the younger version of me, and the decisions I did or didn't make, or the things I said or didn't say when I should have. I'm going to speak to them today. So I'm speaking to the likes of the Jack Taylors and the Charlie Bryces out there. I see you, little brothers. So what I want you to do now is to look around the room, look at the familiar faces and the friends that you have, and imprint that memory in your mind right now. You will remember this day for the rest of your lives, okay? I can still remember sitting here at individual assemblies and what was said and who said them and the impact that they had upon me. So we're going to start to transform your thinking a little bit here. If you keep doing what you've always done, you will keep getting the same result. So to go forwards, we need to go backwards first. So what I want you to do is to go back to 2015. Some of you, that may be a little challenging about what happened in 2015, but some of you will be very vivid. So just to jog your memory, Donald Trump announced his candidacy for the American election. Chris Froome, if you're a cyclist, won his second Tour de France, and the Australians lost to the All Blacks at the Rugby World Cup. Now I want you to think about, back in 2015, what were your aspirations? What were you like? Who were your friends? What did you want to be? What was the sort of person that you were? And what was important to you back then? If someone asked you, in 5 years' time, where will you be and what will the type of person will you be? What would you tell them? Are you today the person that you aspired to be from 5 years ago? Okay, we can all look back in hindsight and have regrets that we didn't do something, we didn't make a decision, we didn't walk down a certain pathway. So the important thing now is to think about, how am I going to live the next 5 years of my life? Okay, because your future starts today. Because in 5 years, it will surely come, and it will come very quickly. So the question is, where, who will you have become, and how will you live? Now is the time to design the next 5 years of your life, not once they're over. Now, Tony Robbins has this great analogy about the river of life. Okay, we all get on the river of life at the head of the river, and we jump in. And as the river flows and our life goes, We get to forks in the river and we subconsciously don't make a decision about which pathway we're going to take or which direction we go. So the environment shapes us and flows us down different pathways. Now, inevitably, what happens is if you've not made good conscious decisions throughout that river of life pathway, you will get to the end of the waterfall and you will be in for a crash. It could be personal, career-wise, financial. Now, you can make two decisions at that point about paddling as fast as you can to get to the edge and then get back to the head of the river and jump in and make better decisions, or you take that crash and deal with the consequences. It's in your moments of decision that your destiny is shaped. Now, that's not saying that you're going to make good decisions throughout the whole of your life. I've made very dubious decisions, both during the time I was here at Ipswich Grammar and when I left. And I'll give you a classic example. So, we're sitting at assembly like this. I'm in grade 9, sitting about here, and the headmaster, Mr. Larper at the time, had got up and had been very, very firm about no spitting off the balconies, which is still a rule. Headmaster, still a rule. And sitting there with my mates, I was listening, but not consciously deciding to listen. And so we go out, very next period, and I'm standing outside what were the old economics rooms, and there's that little drop-off that goes down into a garden, and down in the garden below they have these beautiful big plants with huge leaves and hairs on the leaves. And just before PE class, when you got changed in your PE gear, you'd go and grab a leaf, spit in it, and you'd roll the spit around the leaf. It was the highlight of our 14-year-old existence. So there I am, standing at the edge of the balcony with my best friend Sam Robson, and we're standing there looking down at these leaves, and it was just too tempting. And so we had a bit of a spit off the balcony, and there, literally 2 metres away, with the window open, standing at the window, is the economics teacher, Mr. Diekman, who, I've got to say, is now my father-in-law, so we have a great laugh about this. So, at the time, the decision to perform that act wasn't a very good one, and I'd not made conscious decisions about whether that was the right thing to do or not to do. And Mr. Diekman, I have huge respect for, because at that time he called us both in, and we knew back then, if you spat off balconies, you got a little tap on the bottom, which doesn't exist anymore. And he said to us, you heard the principal at the assembly this morning, and you know what the consequences are. But I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to check with your maths teacher, your English teacher, and your form teacher. And if you've been behaving in those classes, you won't get the cane. If you've been misbehaving, you'll get it. So a week later, it's second period, I'm down here on the oval doing PE, and over the PA system, Mr. Reimer, the deputy headmaster, says, can Adam Scott please attend the deputy principal's office? Every single boy in the school heard this, and I just had a huge vasovagal, blood pressure dropped. I'm in my little tiny PE shorts. Didn't get the advantage of quickly going to the lost property to put on a few extra pairs of shorts. Went up, saw Mr. Reimer, got told to look at the painting in the wall, and got one on the bump. And for me, at the time, I thought, I was pretty, hurt because my integrity had been called into question. But when I looked back on it, that respect that Mr. Diekman gave me to be able to see if I'd been behaving or not been behaving was my fault that I'd not been behaving. I'd not made good decisions during that whole period through those schooling years. But you know what? As I walked out of Mr. Reimer's office and walked past, as I ran past the lockers and then walked past the open classrooms, just walking casually, and then as soon as I got past the open classroom, holding my bottom, because it was stinging, and everybody that looked out through the doorway saw me walking back, and I thought, my pride is stinging here. I need to make better decisions about what I do on a daily basis, not just from a personal perspective, but from a sporting perspective, from an academic perspective. So the key with this is the person you are today does not define who you're going to be for the rest of your life. So if you're not achieving academically, make the decision to go and speak to your teacher, to get a tutor, to make better decisions. I was an average student with great potential but never realised until I made better decisions to get guidance and education and that support. Same with sport. I was a very enthusiastic sportsman and played all sports, but I never applied myself hard enough in training to be able to get to the top level until I finished high school and then went to the World Triathlon Championships and the World Paddleboard Championships, because I had that belief in myself that I could do it. So the person you are today does not define who you're going to be in future, but the foundation of values that you get from this school is the building block for your future that you can build upon. So how do we make better decisions? We've all got flabby decision-making muscles. So the best thing to do is strengthen those decision-making muscles, and the way to do that is to make more decisions, more conscious decisions. So I'm standing here making decisions, holding my face mask because it's about to drop on the ground, it's going to get filthy, so I'm holding on to it. That little tiny decision, as well as when I drive home, I'm going to stop and get some water so I don't get dehydrated because I've got to see patients this afternoon. Preparing for the future, all those little decisions start strengthening your decision-making muscles so that when the time comes for you to make a major decision in your life, a big one, it could be about one of your family members being very ill. It could be about what you do with your career pathway, who you're going to be friends with. You will be able to make a much stronger and better decision because you've made lots of decisions as part of that journey. So remember, it is in your moments of destiny, in decision, that your destiny is shaped. Make no decisions and your environment will shape you, okay? And you will end up going with the flow and being one of a general mass. You're at a school where you are not one of a general mass. You are a part of an elite, exceptional group of individuals that have got a very strong foundation to be anything you want. Believe in yourself, okay? And I'm not just talking from a sporting perspective. If your rugby coach has said you can't tackle, that doesn't mean you can't, it just means you haven't trained hard enough. You can go away and learn to tackle. They don't pick the Wallabies in under 13s. It's not until you've grown and you're in Colts and you're 6'2" tall and big and strong and smarter and wiser. Same academically. If you're not getting the grades that you aspire to, that doesn't define who you are. You can always get support and help. I've seen a huge number of very average students lost, find their way, go on and do medicine and become very high-level, respected specialists throughout the medical fraternity. So believe in yourself. Now, the greatest value you can have now and into the future is kindness. Okay, I work a lot in the mental health space, and every single person in this room is fighting a battle you know nothing of. They're either fighting it today or they're fighting it tomorrow or in the future. Okay, but generally you're fighting it alone unless you reach out and support them. So by being kind is not a sign of weakness. Being kind is being proud of who you are, but being proud of your friends. Okay, rather than point a finger when they do something wrong, go over and pick them up, put your arm around them and go, I've got you, brother. I will not leave a man down. Okay? Think of that when you're hurting. What do you need to pick you back up and get you back on track? Because today you can do that for someone else. Okay, so demonstrating kindness is the most powerful value you can have moving forward into your life, because you're going to need to display it over and over and over again. So, when you're sliding down the handrail of life, you will get the occasional splinter in your bottom. There's no sliding on handrails as well. Thank you. When you get that splinter, it hurts. You sit down on the stairs and you grieve. And then there's a choice about what you didn't do right then. There's a decision to be made. Do you remove the splinter straight away or do you let it fester? It's in your moments of decision that your destiny is shaped. So start thinking about those great decisions you're going to make, all those small decisions you're going to make. So today I leave you to think about what decisions you're going to make. You are the masters of your own destiny. Your destiny is shaped by your decisions you make today, so make them wise ones. Be the creator of solutions, think big, be inclusive, act courageously, and be kind. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Scott. As a small token of our appreciation for your time and that message today, a very important message, I'd like you to receive a small gift from our school captain, Xavier Woodgate. So if you just mind coming back up onto stage, please, and Xavier will present you with a small gift. And let's give Professor Scott another round of applause, please. In the absence of singing our national anthem and our school song today, we have Year 11 student Dravesh Avinakuma performing a special musical number for our assembly. Dravesh will be playing Chanson de Matin by Elgar, and accompanying him on the piano will be our Director of Performance and Head of the Arts, Mr. Leon Wensley. Can you please make them both welcome? Thank you, Dravesh, and thank you, Mr. Wensley. That was simply outstanding. Well done, thank you. That officially concludes our Foundation Day Assembly for 2021, and I'd like to extend my thanks to our guests for taking the time to celebrate that with us today. And I'd like to thank our staff and the students for also helping mark another one of our birthdays. It's a very important day in our school calendar and it should be celebrated as such. We will now have the recessional. Please stand quietly. Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Staff and students in years 7 to 12, we're going to extend morning tea by 20 minutes. It means we'll have a shortened period 3, and then we'll have normal period 4 and 5. So extended morning tea 20 minutes, shortened period 3 by 20 minutes, and a normal 4 and 5.